Good morning. I'm Emma Rowena. I welcome you to this Monday morning talk. And this week I'm going to dig into the broken heart. So for those of you who relate to this, welcome. If you don't and you're just curious, welcome. If you don't feel this is appropriate for you, you don't need to watch or listen. But if you're curious, I would love to hear from you and see what you think about this topic. Most of us have been through a breakup, a loss in our life. And most of us have experienced a broken heart. I certainly have. So let me tell you my story, because I've referred to this a few times before. And a few years ago, I suffered a breakup that was devastating to me. I didn't know how to continue. I didn't know how to live my life, because I had dedicated my whole identity to this relationship, and we had a child together. And how on earth do you go on when your identity suddenly it collapses? It's broken, it's abandoned. And at first I wouldn't believe it, but then when I realized that my partner had actually decided that he was going to leave, I remember falling down onto the floor, sobbing. Not even sobbing, I just could not stand. And it took me a long time to get over this. There were many things going on, and we talked of trying it again, and then he met somebody else, and I had another crashing down. And I spent actually over 2 years, close to 3 years, before I felt free from this and before I could even consider meeting somebody else. Although I tried to imagine that I wanted somebody else, but all I really wanted was for this to mend. And I just couldn't figure out how to do it. I did seek help. I tried all these tools that I'd learned, and I was undergoing a development at the moment through learning this healing and these intuitive readings that I work with now. So that did help to a certain extent, but it still took me a long time. And I remember feeling guilty for spending so much time on this, for not spending so much. Well, that's one thing, because it consumed me. It consumes you if you can't let go. But also for the fact that it took so long for me to let go of somebody and a relationship that I knew wasn't even really that good. But it had to do with my identity, and it had to do with the life that I had chosen to commit to. And I felt a failure. I felt undeserving of love. I felt unattractive. And I tried to sort of prove that I was, and all these things going on. And the main thing I think that I see now that might have caused it to take so long was that I tried to avoid the pain. I didn't quite see how I could stand it. And I didn't quite see how I could hold that pain, so that I could heal from within, rather than trying to, I don't know, somehow imagine it away. And yes, there are tools where you can release things energetically, and I use those all the time, and it's fantastic, and it does work. But when a part of you doesn't want to release things, it's not going to work. So I had to also accept and face the fact that I really wanted this to fix this again. I wanted to be loved and acknowledged by that man again, because I had felt not acknowledged, as I know he had as well. Now, to cut this long story short, we're now friends. He's suffered some injury and some quite grave ailments, and we're in a place where I can actually help him, and we can be close friends. But I'm also, I have a different identity. My identity is now mine. It's not based on that relationship. So what happens when somebody breaks your heart, or when you're abandoned, or when you're left or betrayed, or when you lose somebody, what happens to us? We tend to, well, we go into shock usually, often. And this shock is a physical reaction as well as an emotional one. And very often, and society tells us to heal, to move forward, to release it. And people kept saying, oh, you've got to get on, you've got to move forward, you've got to move on, you've got to let him go, you've got to heal. Now, I had some good people around me saying, you know, it takes the time it takes. And I had some really good friends that I could share and talk to, who helped me through all the pitfalls that I was going into. But I also discovered that I had myself. Eventually I discovered this. It took some time. And one of the things that I was struggling was feeling guilt over not being better at letting go. Not being better at grieving. I mean, who's good at grieving? Not being better at dealing with this. Not being better at finding somebody new. All kinds of things going on that we tend to do because there are some ideas, some thoughts in our societies, in our world, about how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to heal. And there are all these stages. And I've talked about this in the grief videos after I lost my dog. And I've talked about these things earlier as well. And the one thing that maybe is a little bit of a mantra of mine is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement, acknowledgement, acknowledgement. Where are you? Who are you? It's your way of doing it. It's your way of grieving. It's your way of I mean, the time you spend is your time to spend. It's your life. But at some point, you will probably want to, or you'll get fed up with being in that state. And then you sort of go, well, how can I get out of it? How can I move through it? How can I heal? And we don't want this pain, usually. We don't want to feel that way. And it drains us, and we can't deal with our reality. And we can't... I had a son I had to care for, and that became part of my pain because I could see his pain and I didn't know how to hold him because I was going through my own pain. And all we did in the end was sort of hold each other in this. And as a mother, you don't want your child to be sort of the one who has to heal you, but I think we healed each other. Fortunately, we had each other. But even when you don't have somebody else, and even as I said, as a mother, you have the responsibility to care for your child. And this child needs to deal with his grief or her grief. And yes, you can get help for that as well. But ultimately, you need to heal yourself. And the more you manage to acknowledge your pain, your grief, and actually stay with it, sit with it, let it sink into your hips. I had a client last week, I think 2 weeks ago, and I did this exercise with him, and I sort of invited him to try, instead of trying to get it all out of there and release it and out into the universe and heal it, and sort of, okay, but let it flow into you and through you, not the trauma, not to hold on to the trauma, and not to hold on to the events as such, but to acknowledge and actually feel those feelings. Now, this person hadn't been met by his surroundings in his emotions, so you know, he had that pain as well, and so allowing and helping this person. And it was frightening, and I don't know if he managed it right there. He didn't right then, but he, you know, it's a practice. You have to dare to try it. And managing to actually sit with your own feelings, because they're not dangerous. And you know why I know this? Well, I've seen it and I've felt it. But they're not dangerous because they're part of you. They're yours. They're your expressions, your emotions. It's energy shifting in you. They're not your essence. Your essence is free from this. your heart, your essence, beyond this spark of light in there that I've been talking about and meditating on for weeks now with you, that's the healing space. That's the space that's free from this. But your emotions are part of your expression, part of your exploring this thing called life here on earth, part of your movement. And here's another key word: movement. Because when you try to escape or push away your emotions, or when you ignore them, pretend they're not there, try to fix them from here, or from being clever, or from wherever, or from pushing, from a willed will, then they get stuck. You solidify them because you give them a lot of attention, trying to not give them attention. Your focus goes there, and they get stuck in the body. When you ignore them, they get stuck in the body. But emotions are emotions. Your grief is an emotion, and it can take time, yes, and it will have different sensibility. It will have different hues in different times. It will move in different paces through you. But if you allow it to move, it means crying, it means howling, it means talking, sharing, it means talking to yourself. Okay, I've got this. That's the grief I'm feeling. Okay, embrace yourself. You poor you for feeling this way. I feel so for you, like you would a child. You would hold a child who was crying until it calmed down enough so that you could reach through, right? Well, and you wouldn't want that child to try and be clever. You'd want that child to express this grief, to express whatever it is that's hurting so much. And then you would want to find a way to console it so that the child could accept it and move forward. And this same mechanism is still in us. We have the child within us. So if you're in pain, you've suffered loss, a breakup, a divorce, whatever it is, and you don't know how to deal with it, you don't know how to manage, or it's been going on for a long time, you don't know how to move forward, you don't know how to release, how to regain your own sense of self, your own strength, your own joy. It's possible, it can happen, it will happen if you choose it to happen. It can take some time, it will take the time that's right for you. But at some point you will choose to finally say, it's enough. I'm done now. That's it. Okay. It's funny, this analogy comes now, and it's a very different topic, but smokers who try to quit, they can try and they can try and they can try and they can try, and somehow they don't understand why they can't stop. It's an addiction. But some people just decide, suddenly, they're not smokers anymore. Their identity shifts. But they've probably worked with it in their back of the mind for a long time. Now, I'm not saying that a grief or a loss is an addiction, but sometimes we get stuck in it and we can't release it. And that's what I found in my life. And at some point, you decide, that's not my identity anymore. One, my identity is not in that partnership. It's not being that mother in that relationship, or being that family person in that relationship. You can still be a family person, but you can choose, or you can find a different constellation. But that's one thing. But you're also, your identity, at one point you decide you don't want to be the one who's stuck lamenting over somebody in the past for the longest time. Again, there's no judgment here. Whatever time you've been in this, it's fine. Just acknowledge it. Yes, this is how long it takes for me. Somebody told my son, it told me, relating to my son, it took him some while to start walking. He was quite late in walking. He was quite a big boy, and then somebody said, well, to him, but sort of to me, Well, it takes the time it does for me, doesn't it? Sort of thing, making me realize, yes, he's got his own time. We all have our own time, our own pace, our own ways. We have traumas maybe that are triggered through a breakup. Maybe I had this abandonment issue from my parents' divorce and my father alcoholic, and I had things to deal with as part of my healing that came to the surface. And all this acknowledgement, acknowledging what your pace is, acknowledging your emotions, allowing them, sitting with your emotions, sometimes even exaggerating. You might even crouch down on the floor, and I mentioned this in a previous video, I think around grief, and allow yourself to truly express it for yourself or with somebody. After my ex's injury that he had this spring, I came home after having sort of got him to the hospital, held him through a period and communicating with his daughters and keeping the space. I came back home after a week. I suddenly realised things have shifted. Our whole reality has shifted again. And my son was sitting there, and I left the house and I went to my friend and I said, she's just around the corner. I said, do you have a moment? And I went to her, and I feel emotional as I say it because it was such a powerful experience. I went to her and I just completely cracked up. I sobbed, I cried, I howled, and she held me. And she held me. And she held me. And what happened was I released all this fear and this shock. And it is an emotional thing for me to think of because it's a powerful emotion, and it was a shock, and it's still a bit of a shock. And the same when you break up or a loss, your life shifts. It's a shock. And at some point, I invite you, and this is my invitation today, and on Wednesday I'll go a little bit further in how we can seek ways of healing and moving forward. But find somebody or someplace, or even if it's just yourself or a therapist or somebody that allows you to truly sob and howl and feel and let it move and let it and shake your body or whatever it is. There are therapies. There's a form of therapy where you shake your body. Veterans after war actually have had a lot of experience of success with this, and animals do it naturally through trauma, through shock. When the bodies shake, they release all that trauma. So allow somebody to hold you, allow this to come through, and don't give up. Don't stop it thinking, oh, it's too much for my friend, or it's too much, it's lasting too. Let the sobbing go on until you're empty, until it's done, until you can stand up, take a deep breath, and maybe feel a little different because you released stuff stuck in your body. You've let it go out of your body. When you start releasing that from your body starts to collaborate with you in your healing. So, my dears, if you have suffered a loss and a breakup that you're still stuck in or feeling very powerfully in you, acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the time it takes, try to accept, try to sit with it. Maybe you write it down. Okay, I accept that I, and your name, take this time grieving my loss, and that I'm feeling this, whatever it is, and try and feel it. I mean, really feel it. It's not dangerous. It's just energy moving through you. It's a reaction. It's a way of dealing and releasing the trauma. And then try to bring it down into your hips and sit with it until you're ready to start moving. And you will have moments where you feel like you can move, and moments where it'll come back to you, and do it again and do it again until one day there's nothing to do again. It's free. You're free. Now I'd like you to join me in this little 3 breath exercise again, where we finish in anchoring yourself in your foundation, in your hips. So what you do is take a deep breath with your eyes open or closed, but closed maybe makes it even more beautiful and powerful. Take a deep breath in, receiving acceptance. Receiving acceptance for your emotions from all your surroundings and the universe. And as you breathe out, bring this acceptance down into your hip. You go with it, just imagine it. Breathe in. Acknowledgement for feeling this way and for being you in this situation. And as you breathe out, imagine bringing this acknowledgement down into your hips. And the final breath, breathe in compassion for yourself, like you would show to a child. Compassion for you in this situation, moving through your grief. And bring this compassion with your exhale all the way down into your hips. And rest in this acknowledgement, this acceptance, and this compassion for a moment. And bring your hands to your heart. Send a thought of gratitude to your essence, to your healing heart, to who you are, for being you and for doing it your way. And that's it. And bring forward into the day the intention of holding yourself, holding your own space, and sitting with your emotions in your journey. Thank you for listening and watching. I wish you a beautiful, beautiful day. Take care. And on Wednesday, I will share a little bit more about how you can heal, how you can move through this, the process, the journey, the release. Bye-bye.